Welcome to Andy Ari On3. The Gator Boys stayed hot. Florida is your national champion. My faith in my alma mater, I don't know if it did anything for me, but it was pretty good for you, Ari.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you were wrong the entire game. So just a little behind the scenes here. Andy River and I are in a group chat. Okay, and during sporting events and things that we're going to talk about on the show, we are engaging in conversation behind the scenes. And at halftime, when I didn't bet at all, believe it or not, because I had stuff going on at my house, I didn't bet on the game yet. Funny enough, Andy goes, "Are you going to bet this live?" And I was like,
this is so
halftime.
Florida's just missed a three-pointer at the buzzer at halftime that would have tied it. So they're down. It was 31-28, I think, at that point. Walter Clayton Jr. has 0 points. Will Richard is carrying Florida. He's got 14 of their 28 points at that point.
Yeah. And Andy goes, "Are you going to bet it live?" And I said, I think Florida turns the ball over too much. And I don't think that they're going to get away with it again against a team this good. And he goes, okay. And I was like, "Do you think Florida's going to win?" And he goes, "Yes, I do." And then I put a chunk on Florida plus 110 or 107. And he goes,
Terrible
"I thought you were going to
odds.
get better odds." And I was like, well, it's better odds than before the game. They were 1.5 point favorites before the game. But he's like, "Would you think it was going to be plus 160? They were only down by 3 at halftime, and their best player hadn't scored much." So I did it. And then the second half starts, and like Florida has 6 fouls. Like, did they have 6 fouls in 3 minutes? Like
They had 4 team fouls in about I want to say about a 45-second span. And what turned out to be wild is actually Florida got into the double bonus before Houston did in the second half. So it caught up, but there was a stretch there where Florida was fouling like crazy. Houston was scoring. Nothing was going right for Florida. So they get down 12 with 16:24 to go. I believe it was 42-30 at that point. And it looked like the game was over.
So yes. And at that point, I was like disgusted because I was like, I knew this was going to happen. They turned the ball over too much. They're sloppy. And because I felt like they were kind of sloppy in the Final Four game too. I know that you and I have a little bit of a disagreement.
They were, but it was because Auburn's a really physical defensive team like Houston is. So I expected that. And this is exactly what we talked about in the preview. Houston's going to make you play its game. Like, you have to be able to beat them playing their game. You can't make them play yours. And that's what Florida did, is they were willing to play Houston's game, and they played it just a little bit better.
But here's the genius part. I, as somebody who is really into dollars cost averaging, was like, well, Florida's down 12. There's 16 minutes left in the game at that point, and they were catching 5-1 odds. So I hit it again at 5-1 to bring my terrible odds from halftime into like more 3-1 range. And then Florida went on a run, ended up winning the game, and it was an exciting, really amazing game. The last possession, obviously, you would have liked to see a shot go up just from an entertainment.
But I'm thinking I'm the only person on earth who loved the way it ended, because it encapsulated the game. It was how it should end with this Houston team playing, because that's how Houston plays. That's the game Houston drags you into. And Houston is usually the team that does that stuff well. Like the Walter Clayton Jr. closeout on Emmanuel Sharp that caused him to not shoot and then go, "Oh crap, I'm gonna travel, so I got to drop the ball." Walter Clayton Jr. teleported from the middle of the lane to 5 feet away from the top of the key. I don't know how he got there as fast as he did. And then is just flying into Emmanuel Sharp's face. And Emmanuel Sharp freaks out. Like, he didn't, I didn't understand until I watched the replay 2 or 3 times. And that's what I got it. Like, the reason Emmanuel Sharp bugged out and didn't shoot is he didn't think Walter Clayton Jr. could get there. When Walter Clayton Jr. appears like fully formed, fully stretched out in front of him, Emmanuel Sharp was like, what the hell just happened? Are you magic? And he drops the ball.
And I think too, like the way the game ended was fine. I just think people like to see buzzer beaters go up,
But
the fact is you're down 2 with 4 seconds left. Like that's, the final possession, that's because of that. The roller coaster of the game was really awesome. And it was cool to see, like, I mean, Florida deserved to win the national title just because there were certain times in this tournament where it felt like they were cooked, especially in that Texas Tech game, and they never gave up. And I mean, I guess the same thing could be said for Houston and what they did against Duke. But yeah, Miss Ari was sitting next to me the whole time, and she was actually watching the game. I told her what was going on. She knew what was at stake, and she was a good sport about it. But Miss Ari also knew that we leveraged quite a bit of money on Duke to win the national title, and that missed, the night before, or 2 nights before. So we're not like rolling around in dough right now, but we're closer.
Oh, I thought I made back the Lincoln Riley bet for you. I thought that's all I was doing.
You made back. So I made enough money. I made $1,200 because I got 5-1 basically. But yeah, Andy paid back his USC Lincoln Riley dinner bet. That came back okay. But what didn't come back was the 1,000 that I lost the other night when Duke blew it to Houston. So, but if Duke wouldn't have blown it to Houston, then I would have been in better position. But either way, like that was an entertaining game. And like it's sad because now we have baseball until football season again. And baseball's fun, but I don't know if it's if it gets to quite the drama. Like that was really awesome to watch that second half of that game. And the thing I'll say too, and the thing that never is lost on me, and I'm assuming isn't lost on anybody who watches these games, is imagine how much work it took for Houston. Imagine how much sweat, blood, tears, laughter, all the work that goes into it. And when the margin of the game, and you called this, you knew the game was going to be a 2-point game, like at the end of this, to be one bucket, a few free throws, one possession away from glory and fall short has got to be the most gut-wrenching feeling, not just for the people who are experiencing it, but also the people who are watching it. And the same thing would have been true if Houston would have made a 3 on that last possession for Florida, right? Like,
right, exactly.
You make it to the end of this long, grueling tournament that takes a hell of a lot to get to the end to. And then you are one bounce of the basketball either way away from either being champions forever or falling short and being a footnote in the story of the season. And I think that is just, that's the stakes of sports, and that's what makes it so compelling. But at the same time, too, whenever I see it happen, it makes me, I felt terrible for Houston after the game was over as I was cheering. But yeah.
And I watched the press conference afterward, and I just like the guys that Juwan Roberts, who's been at Houston for 5 years, and really kind of they found him. He came from the Virgin Islands, like really good story, and just an amazing transformation of him into like one of the most important players on one of the best teams in college basketball. He was just devastated, and it was hard to watch because how much work he put in to get there, and they were that close, and he had a bad night. Like he missed some shots in the post that normally he makes. And a lot of that was Florida's got some pretty big post guys that are fairly good defenders. Ethan in the chat says, I don't think Micah Hanglotten gets enough credit for returning. Broke his leg at the end of last season and burned his red shirt to return to the team. Gave Florida some huge depth. He sure did. He was not supposed to come back this season, and then came back in the middle of SEC play. And he was in there in crunch time last night. Florida only played 8 players. They can go 10 deep, but they only played 8 players, and every one of them made major contributions.
Andy, you're supposed to come back for a season like that. I mean, if your team is a 1 seed caliber,
well, yeah, why not? Like it's something special, and you want to be part of it,
right?
And the thing is, they needed him. They needed him to do that, and this was like, I think of every player who played last night, and I can think of a moment where they made a big play, like Denzel Aberdeen, who, he's a good backup guard, but when you're playing with Walter Clayton Jr. and Will Richard and Elijah Martin, like you don't get a lot of shine. But Denzel Aberdeen's in there at a crucial moment. So we talked about this after the Duke Houston game, and I said, I think if Florida gets in a position where they've got to inbound the ball and Houston's pressuring them, that Florida won't melt down. Well, guess what? They almost did. Now, Walter Clayton gets the ball in and then gets it back in the backcourt and just chucks a pass that I think he thought was going to connect, but he overthrew Denzel Aberdeen, and Denzel Aberdeen had to sprint to get it, and he just beat the Houston player to the ball. The Houston player had to foul at that point. But like that's a huge play. If Denzel Aberdeen does not track that ball down, Houston steals it, and it may be completely different outcome. And that's what I loved about this game. Whether it was Houston or Florida, it was the ultimate team game. The ultimate team win for Florida. It would have been an incredible team win for Houston. There was no one just dominating the game. Will Richard probably for Florida in the first half. But the fact that Walter Clayton Jr. had 0 points in the first half, Houston was doing everything possible to take him away. And he found ways to contribute. He had 7 assists. Again, the closeout on Houston's last, it wasn't even a shot. He made sure it wasn't a shot. So it was just spectacular to watch two teams that, look, I think Walter Clayton Jr. is probably a good NBA player. I don't know who else here's a good NBA player.
Yeah. You know, the thing that stuck out to me about Walter Clayton Jr. that was, not going to be talked about much, I think, just in the actual discourse of the game, is that even on a night where he wasn't shooting well and wasn't scoring at the rate that you expect him to score, like he made the defensive play that caused Florida to win the game in that closeout. And like when you talk about draftable players or talk about players that you want on your team, I mean, he knocked down some big free throws down the stretch. I know that he was having a historic free throw percentage run here in the tournament, but like, a player in his position, maybe his experience and all that stuff played a part in this, but like he never like got down on himself and like realized that you could impact the game in ways that have nothing to do with putting the ball in the bucket. And like he made the biggest play of the game, which is that insane closeout that no one saw coming. Like even watching it on TV, I was like, holy crap, how are they defend? Like he had a look. Like when he pulled up to shoot, like you thought he was going to shoot.
Right. I don't know how Clayton got there. I have no idea. Because I didn't realize watching it live how far he came from. And then when I watched the replay, I'm like, how did he do that? Like, did he call Scotty and have him beam him there? Like that shouldn't have happened.
And I assume too, like during the NBA draft, because everybody was talking about this on Twitter when we were together the other day. But like, here's like another player who's probably going to fall to the back half of the first round, and then in 2 years is going to be an NBA All-Star, and everyone's going to be like, "How did that happen?" It's like, Europe.
Well,
European tweet that you read?
Robbie Callan from CBS said that's what he said. He's like, the NBA draft's going to happen, and then Walter Clayton Jr. is going to be a good player, and everybody's going to be like, "How in the world did this happen?" And our friend Tom Fornelli from CBS goes, if he was French and his name was Maxime Lachance, he'd be a top 5 pick. It's true. It's true. It's because he's American. He played at Iona first. He came to Florida. But that's, if you look at how Todd Golden built this Florida team, and it's kind of similar to how a little bit different than Kelvin Sampson, because like Kelvin Sampson goes and gets LJ Cryer, who'd been a really good player at Baylor before last season. But and Kelvin Sampson was more homegrown. That Kelvin Sampson's team looked more like an old school, like I recruited a lot of these guys at high school kind of team. Todd Golden gets to Florida in 2022. Mike White's just left for Georgia. The roster, there's no roster essentially. Will Richard was the first player to even visit Florida. And how crazy is this? Sorry. So he gets Will Richard in that spring of 2022. There was another player that they were close on. There was a guy who grew up in Plant City, Florida, which is a suburb of Tampa. He was transferring from Morehead State, and he had it down to Florida and one other school, and he picked the other school. Do you know who that person was?
Who?
Janai Broom.
Oh, that would.
Can you even imagine? But that's what Golden seems to have a real knack for being able to look at these mid-major rosters and see where guys can fit together, because it's not just a case of he went out and got the highest profile guys in the portal. He went out and got the guys that would fit together the best. So, and it wasn't all in the same year. So he gets Will Richard before his first season. He gets Walter Clayton Jr. before the 2023-24 season, because remember, Walter Clayton Jr. is playing really well for Iona, which is in New York. You go, above like New Rochelle, that area. So, but he's from Lake Wales, Florida. And Rick Pitino goes to St. John's. Clayton considers going to St. John's with Pitino, but he gets the chance to come back home because he's from Lake Wales, Florida. That was huge. Ruben Chinyelu this year had played one season at Washington State, and he's the only one that came from a power conference program. And it wasn't a power conference program anymore once they got him. So you got him. You got Mike Hanglotten was from Marshall. Elijah Martin was from Florida Atlantic. So they did a really good job figuring out how these pieces fit together, because this was a team that played well together, that played like a team that had been together for 5 years, even though that's impossible to have in today's college basketball.
Yeah. And what a job coaching, right? I mean, like it's doing it, finding pieces that gel together that well and putting them together in one season the way that they did. A lot of that is evaluation and knowing that would work, but then also I come across this stuff in my life. Like, it's like, oh, I found this really good deal on something online, but then I have to assemble it. And like, sometimes the deal is great, and then the assembly is the problem, right? Like, and if you know me, Andy, like this curtain up here, for instance, it looks like somebody that has never done anything in their life did it, but it was a good deal.
It's working. It's doing the job.
Yeah, I know. Look at this. River helped me out with my camera settings. I think I have to zoom in a tad more because your face is a little bit bigger than mine.
You look amazing. Here. I'll tell you what. I'll move back. How's that?
Yeah, we're lined up now, right? And like now the camera is like looking at me in the eye, so you can see the cool pictures. And I took these pictures, by the way, shot with an iPhone. If you want to buy one before they're $4,000,
you should. Yeah, you should sell that. The Ari Wasserman press box collection would do really.
Yeah, I've got some good ones.
Big numbers.
Michigan, Ohio State, from my time covering them. Up here, I have the national title game. I've got a Nebraska picture, Penn State, which is my favorite because of the contrast of the whiteout.
Ari. Mike in the chat has just given us a point to pivot on.
Okay, let's do it.
To get to the sport we cover a lot. And I don't know if I'm not sure I necessarily agree with him, but I want to talk this out because I think it's an interesting conversation to have relative to football and also relative to Florida. So we're talking about how Todd Golden built this national championship team. And he's got some guys out of high school, like Thomas Houck was a giant Tim Tebow fan living in Pennsylvania, who when Florida came to offer him, he's like, oh my God, I can go where Tim Tebow went. And, Alex Condon is from Australia.
They got players made their college decisions based on that.
On another, like the guy played a different sport.
You know what I call? You remember Jonathan Hankins, the Ohio State defensive lineman that was like 340 pounds but could run like the wind? And the first recruiting call I ever called him on after he committed to Ohio State, he said to me on the phone, "I like their shiny helmets."
Wow, it's a good thing you never saw a Notre Dame game. He might not have gone there.
Yeah, but that's what he said to me on the phone. I'm assuming that more went into it than that. But like, I was like, "Why did you choose Ohio State?" And he said, "I like their shiny helmets." I'm like, "That's a choice." It worked out well. He's had a long and successful NFL career, but it's a little bit more complicated now. But go ahead.
Here's what Mike said: Billy is doing the same in football, referring to Billy Napier in Florida football. Now, I don't think it's quite the same because Napier's not been as reliant on the transfer portal because Golden had no choice. When Golden got there, and this is also the difference between basketball and football, the roster sizes, but Golden had no roster essentially when he got there, so he had to use the portal a lot. But Napier has built mostly through the high school recruiting, but it is similar in that he's got a sort of I like my guys situation. And he said that last year, and this is where I just crushed Billy Napier all last offseason and early in the season when they lost a couple of games early, is why didn't you do anything to make this roster better? And his thing was, I like these guys that I have. They fit together well, and when they completely mesh, you will understand. And by the end of the season, it wasn't just DJ Lagway coming in and being better. It was the fact that the offensive line looked just a ton better as the season went on. The defensive line got a ton better as the season went on. And then you get to the end of the season and they're on an upswing. Their trajectory is looking good. And you go, okay, well, I bet they're going to just go all out in the portal and get whatever stars are available in the portal to just make this a super team for next year. And they don't. And you're like, oh, well, what are they doing to improve the team? And I saw Billy Napier at the Senior Bowl, and he's like, I like my guys. I like these guys. And yeah, I was talking to somebody who talks to the LSU folks, and LSU took Jack Pyburn from Florida, the edge rusher. And they had asked the question, basically, hey, how'd you steal this guy away from Florida? And the answer was, it wasn't stealing. Like they were so deep that they couldn't keep everybody at edge rusher. So maybe what Billy Napier is doing is working. I don't think it's necessarily the same as Todd Golden, but it is similar in that it's not just go get the biggest name out of the transfer portal. It's find the people who fit together well. Well, we'll see if that works.
That's just an interesting, talking point because, like, is there any mad scientist thing going on in Gainesville from a football perspective that you could buy into? Like, and I think that the difference here is that Florida's best player wasn't a transfer, and
right.
Is kind of the person who's been, they're building the entire team around. That's obviously quarterback DJ Lagway, but also too, like with the locker room sizes and how many people are actually on the team. I think I buy into the gelling, meshing, playing together, all being like simpatico, everybody love everybody in basketball more because the locker room is so small. Like, right. I don't know, like if I buy into the notion of like, well, I really like my guys and, we have a good thing coming here and it's building, but it's like, you think if you added a transfer receiver or a amazing safety that would like somehow hinge or derail your ability to
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's going to be the test. Like we're going to find out because we don't have the answer to that. We're going to see if Billy Napier had the right idea or the wrong idea once they start playing.
I mean, he's betting his career on it. So like, that's the thing. Yeah. Like it's not like low stakes. Well, let's hope this works. It's like either this works or I'm not going to have a chance to do it the other way.
Yeah, because the thing is, you come out of that season and people saw DJ Lagway, especially against LSU and Ole Miss. Like, if you were a receiver, you're like, I want to play with that guy. Think about Elijah Badger and Shamir Dike were good college receivers. I don't think anybody would say they were elite college receivers. They're not going to be drafted super high, but he made them look pretty great. I think it was him doing that because they didn't look that same way with Graham Mertz.
In football too, like if you have a Superman quarterback, you really do overlook a lot of the other things about your team that may, like, I mean, it's an eraser, like, right? Like if you have an issue somewhere, your quarterback will help you erase those things. And I really do believe, and like we've been talking a lot about Florida, when we talk a lot about Florida, and I think that it's because for whatever reason, both you and I have bought into the notion that they're going to be very good. And we're going to see.
Well, we bought into DJ Lagway, I think, I more than anything else.
Well, I also think, too, that we bought into the end of the season last year. The improvement on the lines, like, you cannot look past, okay? Like
no, and they bring most of those guys back. But, but what Billy could have done is they could have probably thrown all of their money for the offseason at the biggest name receivers in the transfer portal.
Like you would have felt, I think I would feel like 20% better. Like I think I would be all in banging the drum if like KC Concepcion or somebody was in the fold or somebody like that, like a Zach Branch. Right. We don't know.
So they got J. Michael Sturdivant from UCLA, who all reports from spring practice, he's going to be pretty good. But they used most of that money to flip Dallas Wilson from Oregon. That's the thing that they're betting on. They're betting on this freshman can come in and be as good. And Dallas Wilson was one of, I'm trying to remember in our industry rankings, I think he was the number 2 or number 3 receiver in the country. And he's a top 15 overall player. So that's the bet Like that's the bet that Billy Napier is placing. And like you said, he's betting his career on it. The kid McFly in the chat goes, I think the football team will jump in Lagway's junior year. Here's the thing about that. If it has to jump in his junior year, he's playing for somebody different. Like they have to do it now or they're going to make a change.
It's like also the question too is like, how good do you think Dallas Wilson has to be? Like if Jeremiah Smith is a 10, what does Dallas Wilson need to be as a freshman? A 7?
7.5? Yeah. 8 would be, they're in really good shape if that happens. Because Sturdivant seems like he's going to be pretty good. And then they get Eugene Wilson, the third back, who was hurt a lot of last year. Yeah. They got a kid named Aiden Mizell who showed some flashes last year that he could be pretty good. So I am really interested to see what happens. But I thought Mike made a really interesting comparison there between the building of these two teams, because it is like Todd Golden, when those guys signed, nobody said, oh my God, Florida got so-and-so. Like Walter Clayton Jr., they knew he was a good player at Iona. Everybody knew he was a good player at Iona. The question is, did people know he would be this and that? By the way, how good is Rick Pitino that he ID'd Walter Clayton Jr. At Iona?
I think that the reality of that is he's very good. One of the best coaches to ever coach. One last point I wanted to make about the football team.
Yeah.
And it's a name that we never talk about when we talk about Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Baugh is awesome.
He's really good.
People talk about him ever?
Rising sophomore running. They talk about him a lot here.
Okay. But like not on podcasts, and we don't even talk about him. Like I
no,
feel like...
and so I'll like another behind the curtain. Producer River and I were waiting on Ari to get down to San Antonio the other day. I had picked River up at the airport and we had a few hours to kill. And we're sitting in the rental house and we got to talking about the end of the football season and games that were really interesting. Like we talked about the Alabama-South Carolina game. And so we watched the condensed version of that. And then we watched the condensed version of LSU Florida and Ole Miss Florida and Tennessee Florida to get another look at DJ Lagway and see, do we remember it right? Was it really as shocking as of a difference once he got in? And yeah, like that LSU game, when he makes the throw with the guys draped all over him, there are a bunch of throws in those two games where you're like,
a little shiver.
Nobody makes these throws.
Yeah. All right. So like we're drinking the Kool-Aid, guys. And like I think there are certain teams that I latch onto in the offseason, and sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm terribly wrong. But Notre Dame was my team last year, and I was right. Obviously, they got all the way to the national championship game. And then the year before was Texas, which wasn't much of a limb to go out on. But if you remember at the time, it was, because people are like, oh, they always suck and they always let you down. And it's preseason hype and they made the playoff. And I think that like I haven't made my pick yet this year for like who my squad's going to be going into it. But like Florida's the front runner right now.
Yeah, Florida is one of those, and they're flying dangerously close to the sun too, because they're, as we've said, they're probably the lowest floor and the highest ceiling. I mean, they're probably the biggest gap between floor and ceiling of anybody in the country.
But if you compare vibes from this year to last year, like at this 100% last year,
how negative was I about Florida this time last year? Every time they came up, I was like, but what did they do to get better? Show me what they did to get better.
Yeah. And like, I also buy into freshmen can change your team. So if you have multiple receivers, at a position that you are kind of iffy on, and I know J. Michael Sturdivant is a player, and people are excited about what he's been doing this spring. I don't know if I'm sold that like that's enough, but if you have one of these two freshmen come in and have really productive freshman years, and DJ Lagway reaches his potential, the line plays as well as they did, and Jaden Baugh runs like a bowling ball like he's been doing, I really do believe that Florida's offense is going to be very good. They get after the passer on the edges. I think they shore up their secondary. Like they have the combination and the pieces there to be a really good football team. Now they have a hard schedule. and like it's going
We'll
to be
see.
hard
Like
to go
how does
10-2,
Miles Graham develop at linebacker? He showed some flashes as a freshman at the end of last season. Caleb Banks comes back. He was awesome at the end of last year at defensive tackle. So yeah, it'll be really interesting because we do not know. And River, throw the schedule up there again. It is brutal. It is brutal. Like starting with LSU in Baton Rouge in week 3. It just there's not a lot of let up there.
I'm gonna keep banging the drum on this though. It looks brutal. It's not guaranteed that it is brutal. Okay.
This is a great point.
So,
This
like,
is a great point.
Looks brutal. There's a lot of flashy logos there.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I actually think you could make the case that if they go, like, what are the 3 hardest games right now, if we look at it, we would think are LSU, Texas, and Georgia, right? Like, because we know Texas and Georgia are going to be in the national championship in the national championship conversation. But LSU has a chance to also be there. And then we don't know what A&M is. We don't know what
Texas A&M is the agent of chaos. Like we did that whole show. They are the agent of chaos.
But like we don't know how good Tennessee is. We obviously don't know what Florida State is, and what Florida State
don't know what Ole Miss is.
Completely different at the end of the year than what we're going to see when they play Bama, at the beginning of the year. But but like how many games here are absolute layups? 1, 2, 3.
Are we calling Mississippi State a layup? Or are we calling Kentucky a layup?
I'm calling Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Kentucky is away. So I don't know if that's absolutely a layup. But
I think that would be 4 if you're including Long Island and USF.
USF, Long Island, Mississippi State are the 3 layups. And
yeah, I wouldn't say Kentucky's a layup because Lexington's been a house of horrors for Florida.
Yeah,
of late.
But if the SEC is like it was last year, that has a lot of really good teams, but not a lot of great unbeatable teams, I think that bodes well for Florida, especially considering the fact that last year Florida was in the game and probably should have beaten Georgia when Georgia was the best team in the SEC. So like they've already proven that if they're playing well behind Lagway, that they can. I mean, they were non-functional against Texas last year, but like that, how do you even analyze that game? They didn't have their quarterback. So like it's just it's there. 10-2 is there, and I think 10-2 is guaranteed playoff. And like eventually we're gonna have to do this. I was listening to Kings of the North on the way back from San Antonio, and they did like the who are your locks to make the playoff and who are your we got to do like locks and most likely and no way and all that stuff about the playoff. Maybe we'll do that closer to
that's but, it's funny because we didn't do that last year because we weren't conditioned yet, but that's the sort of thing we do with the basketball tournament every year, and we should definitely do that with football. Another football basketball question. This is from Willie. Who had the tougher playoff run, Ohio State football or Florida basketball? That is a great question too. I'd say it's Ohio State football because they got every possible hard opponent they could have gotten. I mean, because Notre Dame beat Georgia, so Notre Dame was the better version out of that side of the bracket, and they got they landed on the hardest opponent they could have played in every single round.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time ever that a football playoff could even be in the same part of that question, right? Because like going through the NCAA tournament is just awful. I think I would actually lean Florida if Florida had to play.
Okay, so Florida, obviously the first game's a 116, but Florida having to play UConn in the second round was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan Hurley had them ready. Florida was better, but UConn fought like hell the entire time. Maryland was a really good Sweet 16 opponent. Texas Tech had Florida absolutely cooked. And the Gators came back. And then Auburn was the best team in the country most of the season. So
yeah,
I think you may be right because
it was definitely rough. And like the thing too is that like how it's not often that you get to the Final Four with 4 1s. So having to beat 2 1s in a row is not a typical thing that anybody has to do, let alone, so just that on its, and then you play UConn, of course, and I'll never.
I was gonna say UConn women's basketball actually had to beat 3 1s in a row because they were in the number 2 seed in their region.
Did you want to tell them what happened to me on Sunday?
Yeah, let's do that too. So I've actually been on a good run of giving Ari advice. I know I'm not the greatest advisor for gambling picks most of the time, but I've been on a decent run. So we're watching the women's Final Four games on Friday night, and South Carolina and Texas are kind of deadlocked. And I think Texas had a little bit of a lead at the time. And I was like, Gamecocks are winning this one. And so Ari throws some shekels on the Gamecocks with a decent money line. And
was it a 2-1
to win?
I think it was like 2-1.
It was. Oh, that's right. Because Texas was up fairly significantly.
8 or 9. Yeah.
So he texts me on Sunday, and he's like, so this was halftime of UConn South Carolina national championship game. UConn's up 10.
I was at.
He texts me. He's like, "What's that?"
I was at Dave and Buster's with my daughter playing video games, and I looked up at because they have that, like, it's like a quasi sports bar now. Right. I forgot the game was even on. I was locked into family time. And I saw that South Carolina, which you told me on Friday, was the like big bad bully of women's college basketball. And I saw that they were down by 10, and they were getting 6-1 odds to win, down 10 with the entire second half at halftime. I was like, okay, I just blindly put a few $100 on it because I was like,
and I'm like, don't do it, Ari.
6-1.
They played 2 months ago in Columbia, and UConn won by 29. Like, it's a bad matchup for South Carolina.
You got to put yourself in my shoes. Like, again, like, you think I don't know anything about women's basketball, like less than zero. But I saw the number 1 seed and the South Carolina team coached by Dawn Staley that like is supposed to be like the big bad team that nobody can beat. They play physically. They have players on their team.
Except UConn beat them by 29.
I know, but like, you don't think that 6-1 down 10 at halftime is an attractive bet
to a team that beat them by 29 2 months earlier on their home court?
It's sports. Sometimes things happen. 6-1 is like a lot. It's a pretty long shot. It's a pretty long shot.
Yeah, it's a long shot for a reason because South Carolina's a bad, or UConn's a bad matchup for the South Carolina team.
So I put the bet in, and we're playing. The tickets. By the way, this baby casino. I told you this is a baby casino. I got locked in because she wanted some slime from the. By the way, Dave and Buster's has it figured out. They put like an Xbox controller and like a PC monitor up there, and then everything else is just crap. Like everything is just like literal crap. And the amount of tickets that you need to exchange for even crap is insane. So like I was playing like these beanbag games that you have to throw the beanbag into. I mean, you've been to Dave and Buster's, and like she was
making play skee ball, buddy.
I got to the point where I was like taking them out of her hand and throwing it for her because I was like, I want to get the slime. So we ended up paying $80 for slime because it took us all afternoon to get the 800 tickets that you needed to get the slime, but we got it. But I looked down at my phone and they were down by 27. I'm like, oh my God. And you're like, I told you so. And it's like, well, you did tell me so, but like I put the bet in before you told me not to. Like, in fairness.
I tried. I can't help that you're impulsive.
I'm impulsive. I'm nothing if not impulsive. But like that, again, 1 seed down 10 in basketball is like being down a touchdown at halftime.
Mm-hmm. Except when they're playing the team that kicked their ass. Or what have we said, Ari? Like, actually, I was thinking about that the other day when UConn went ahead and routed South Carolina. Because we talked about this last week on the show. Was it on the show, or were we just talking about it when we were together?
If you got your ass kicked at any point, oh yeah,
if you got your ass kicked at any point, you're probably not going to win the national championship. That was the thing. It was
actually go back and look that up though. Has anybody who's gotten their ass kicked during the season in football ever won the national title?
I'd say no. Basketball, I'm sure they have because they play so many games, and also because teams have injuries and there's different situations. Football, the only reason I could excuse it is say a massive star player, probably a star quarterback, didn't play in that game. That's the only way you can probably excuse that. But like when we left Oxford, Mississippi, after Georgia lost 28-10 to Ole Miss, I think you and I both were like, Georgia's not winning the national title.
Yes. And that was kind of the impetus to picking Notre Dame to go on the run that everybody freaked out about. Like if you remember, like when the bracket came out and we had to do our brackets and I had Notre Dame beating Georgia, like the entire internet was like, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. Notre Dame never wins those games. Like, I just don't think Georgia's the Georgia that we think. I'm very curious. We have to have an off-season discussion about this of like, what is Georgia now?
Well, it's a
They
good
don't
question.
care.
I mean,
Like I don't know if you want to do that now or you want to do it later in the. But
we
like
can
I
do it
think,
later. We have a few of those discussions we need to have. Actually, I had an idea when we were talking about DJ Lagway. We just need to rank our top 10 quarterbacks going to the 2025 season. Let's do that tomorrow.
Yeah. Ohio State.
Let's do that tomorrow.
Did Ohio State get blown out in 14 by Virginia Tech? Do you count that as a
No,
blowout?
it was not a blowout. Virginia Tech won somewhat comfortably at the end of the game, but I don't feel like it was a blowout.
It was 28-14, I think was the score.
Yeah.
And I was there, and like it was the first time like Ohio State's coach, like I've ever heard a team be like they had a defense that we didn't know what to do against.
Yeah,
it was
bear front
defense. Yeah. Yeah. And everybody was like, we've never seen this before. We didn't know what to do. And I was like,
bear front's not that uncommon. That was a very strange reaction, but whatever, it worked for them because they learned something. But that's probably the best example in recent years. I got one. Well, no, because they didn't win. Georgia didn't win the national title in 2017. Alabama lost to Auburn in what felt like a fairly comfortable win for Auburn in 2017. And then Alabama went on to win the national title. I'm trying to remember the score of that game. I covered it, and I remember it felt like Auburn was going to win the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's the number one.
They won 28-14, or no, it's 26-14. So I think it's got to be more than 2 touchdowns. It's got to be like 17 or higher.
I feel like blowouts. It's not always just the score. Like you get a sense. I don't remember what the final score of the Ole Miss Georgia game was. They ran away with it. But it felt that game felt 42-10. And it's not always just like how big was the score. It's whether or not you were competitive for 4 quarters. And I think that Georgia was beaten in all aspects of that game from start to finish.
No, I think you're right. And so we'll test that theory. And I think it might be one of our rules for the show. Because if you got your ass kicked, you can't win the national title.
That's a rule for life, really. But last year with Georgia, I think that they came into and I remember one of the first episodes that we did together when we got back together at On3. I had top 25 or whatever, or you did, or we were talking about it. And I pushed back on the notion of Georgia because like last year, if you go back to this time, everybody assumed and put Georgia in as the number 1 team in the country. And I think that they did that because they were programmed into just blindly believing that Georgia is going to be the best because they're Georgia. And I pushed back on that notion. And I said, and I thought that Ohio State was the best team and number 1 in the country because of all the pieces that they brought back. And I knew what they were. Georgia just didn't scare anybody offensively. And it's like, we looked past that. And I think that like this year, we really need to like try to focus, not me and you, I just mean as a country, looking at these rankings of like, it's more important now than ever. Like how much can a team coast in the preseason rankings based on the logo on their helmet? Because I think that you used to be able to do that 5 years ago pretty comfortably. Now I think you're in danger of being very, very wrong because teams are not saying
the middle of the SEC and the middle of the Big Ten are so much better because of how the players move efficiently within the market that it's not the same. You cannot roll over those teams. And even if you beat those teams, there may be some sort of cumulative effect of playing that many hard games.
We've already touched on this too, of like, teams that you think might be overvalued right now. But I think that there's a general assumption that Alabama and Georgia are going to be very good. And one of my outrageous predictions in the offseason has been that one of those teams is going to be bad. Or one of these and bad based on them, not bad
by their standards. So you're thinking 8-4, 9-3,
8-4, 9-3, but no 8-4. Bad.
8-4,
because I think 9-3, we're going to learn next year too, which kind of goes into another outrageous prediction. But we're going to learn next year too that I think a 9-3 team is going to get in. Like I think last year was kind of an interesting. Like the fact that Indiana existed, like, isn't going to happen every year. So,
well, I did. We were when we were rewatching that Florida Tennessee game. I asked River. I said, "What if Lagway had started this game? Who wins?" He's like, "Probably Florida." And I thought about it. Well, okay, so what if Lagway doesn't get hurt against Georgia?
Afraid you were going to beat him up if he said no.
I don't care that much, but what if Lagway doesn't get hurt against Georgia? Did they win that game? So What if they had beaten Tennessee and Georgia? Like a 9-3 team would have made the playoff in that situation. It might have been Florida at 9-3, or it might have been somebody else. But Tennessee would have had 3 losses. Georgia would have probably wound up with 3 losses at that point. Like, so it would have changed the dynamics.
How many years are there going to be 7 teams in the SEC that could win the conference in week 10? Like, that's what we were dealing with last year. I don't know if that's going to, maybe it'll play out like that all the time because the teams are more evenly matched, but I thought like that was a typical, 7 teams were in the mix there. So it's
A&M, they're, and I don't think these final standings are correct because I believe actually Ole Miss had the tiebreak for the 4th spot. But A&M going into the Texas game, if they won the Texas game, would have played for the SEC championship.
Yeah. So your team, although the only team that was kind of boxed out there at the end was South Carolina because I think that they were playing a non-con game that didn't help them. But like it was, everybody was kind of alive, and like you can't parse through things when there isn't a line of demarcation in the sand of like, here are the teams that are good enough, and like everybody's pretty good. And then like if Indiana lost 1 more game, if they would have lost to Michigan or something, they would have been out,
it would have changed the math of all of it. So
so that I think 9-3 against Georgia, like against Florida's schedule, means Florida's in. I think that a 9-3 SEC team will make it next year.
I think there's a chance. I mean, we'll see as this thing goes forward. Especially, I mean, if they're going to go to 14, you're definitely going to see 9-3 teams get in. You would have seen it this past year.
And if 9-3 teams get in, you also have to acknowledge that at that point when that happens, that the world is going to melt down because there's going to be 3 other 9-3 teams who don't get in that are going to be mad about it. So that's going to happen eventually.
Feature not bug, Ari. Feature not bug.
Yeah, it's like if they would have picked Alabama or Ole Miss last year, there would have been a rift there because it was hard. And even South Carolina felt like South Carolina accepted the fact that they didn't get in last year because nobody else in the SEC did. But if one of the SEC 9-3 teams would have gotten in over Indiana or somebody else, there would have been a complete meltdown. Absolutely.
But whether that was South Carolina, Ole Miss, or Alabama,
one of
like whoever the 2 were that were left out would have been like, what the hell? Like, our resume is just as good as theirs. Vance in the chat. I am very interested for us to discuss the House settlement and all that comes out of it. All right. So I watched the worst pregame show in the history of the national title game, a 7-hour hearing in an Oakland courtroom about the House versus the NCAA settlement. It was very interesting at times. It was very boring at times. So I watched it so you didn't have to. You're welcome. Here's what happened. Basically, Judge Claudia Wilken is telegraphing she is going to approve this thing as long as the lawyers don't screw this up. She's told the lawyers there's a couple things she would like them to tweak, and then she's going to approve it. The NCAA attorney was acting at the end of the hearing yesterday like they don't want to do that. I don't think they're that stupid, but it's the NCAA, so you never know. But here's what she would like them to tweak. First thing, the idea of these roster caps, 105 in football, I think 15 in basketball. Basically, you can have scholarships up to that point, but you cannot, if you opt into the settlement, you're paying players directly, you cannot go over that number of players. So this is causing, especially in football, a lot of walk-ons to get cut. And she's like, why do you have to cut them? Why don't you just phase this in over a 4-year period, and everybody who's on the roster now gets to stay, and then once they graduate, once they age out, then you just then the cap is firm. And they're like, well, you never thought of that. Well, yeah. That seems to be the most humane way to do it.
So, and reasonable because they're not having an impact on the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're going to make them do that, which is great. Sucks for the walk-ons who've already been cut. Like Kirk Ferentz was talking about, he decided, hey, we want to be fair to everybody. So we're going to tell our walk-ons who might not have a spot in December that they might have a spot in case they want to transfer somewhere else and go through spring practice. Like Kirk Ferentz was trying to be fair to his players, and he's going to get screwed out of this. And hopefully some of those guys hung out on campus at Iowa and can just rejoin the team because it sounds like they're going to get grandfathered in, which again, common sense solution. Common sense and the NCAA have never really worked well together, but common sense solution. Hopefully that's what they do. The other piece of it that she thought needed to be tweaked, she kept bringing up this hypothetical 10-year-old playing basketball on the asphalt right now, who at some point is going to be a star recruit who doesn't have any say in this. And this settlement is supposed to create essentially 10-year labor peace is what they're hoping is going to happen. That they're creating a system where the schools can pay the players. The amount the schools can pay the players will go up every year. And so what she's wondering is what happens when that person is a 17-year-old recruit and is about to go into the system and feels like the system is unfair. How do they object? Like, they can't just go get a lawyer now and object to this. They don't even know if they're going to be a college basketball player or a college football player. And that's a legitimate concern. So I think what the judge wants is there to be a mechanism for each year the new members of the class can raise objections, and the court can hear those objections, and they can decide if it's fair or not, instead of somebody saying, well, you have to opt out or you have to just sue. It makes sense, though. I will say, like, Jeffrey Kessler, who's the plaintiff's attorney, and he was involved in the case where the NFL had to let the players become free agents. So he's been doing this a long time, and he's really good at it. He's like, hey, when there's a CBA, the future members of the union don't get a vote. Like the guys who are in college right now, let's say there's a freshman in college right now who's going to be in the NFL in a couple of years. When they negotiate the new CBA, they're not going to get a say. They're not going to be a union member when that happens, but they'll be bound by those rules. So there are examples in other walks of life, but the problem here is it's not a CBA. The players didn't get a chance to vote on it, really. It was the plaintiffs that had a seat at the table. So that one will be interesting to see. But she seems pretty adamant that they have to tweak that or she's not going to approve it.
Yeah. The thing that jumps out to me about that, Andy, is that, like, when you think about the hypothetical 10-year-old, is that the entire existence of college sports, the hypothetical 10-year-old has had to live within the confines of what the rules were. And those rules were unfair for 100 years. And, like, I think that people will just like anything that they can do from a compensation standpoint. I don't know, like, from the annual objections, thought process. It's like, well, if you get paid, like, it's just the rules are the rules. And I think people will conform to them when they understand what they are, much the same way that they did.
Well, the thing that's going to be interesting, and she just sort of blew through this yesterday, is this third party that's going to police NIL deals and say whether they're fair market value or not. She was basically like, okay, sounds good. Like, that's where the problem's going to come in, because that's going to get blown up.
Yeah.
Or it's going to be, the other thing I thought about is they're going to have so many deals that look like the NIL deals now that when Deloitte, the accounting firm that's supposed to be looking at this, when they look at it, they're going to go, well, we just got 2,000 of these deals that look exactly the same. That's the market. And the schools are like, oh crap. That's not what we wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, are they going to look at it from the standpoint of how much someone else in the same position and profile would make doing something similar? Like, are they going
to? Well, they also have information with pro athletes and what they get in their deals. And so,
right. So who do you compare it though to? Do you compare it to pro athletes?
Well, it's a different market. And the thing is, like, the biggest problem is they're still not admitting they're paying them for football, and they keep saying pay for play like it's a bad thing. Like, pay for cook isn't a bad thing. Pay for teach isn't a bad thing. Pay for lawyering isn't a bad thing. Pay for podcasting isn't a bad thing. Like, they're football players, and that's why you're paying them.
But the thing I just have, from an economic standpoint, and, I'm confused about a lot of things economically this week, as we all are. But the thing that I don't know is that if you are going to police these NIL deals and you're going to try to assert fair market value, how do you do that? Like, when you said, like, as you said, like, when all those deals are going to look similar, and then if they don't look similar, like, how do you compare them? And the only thing that you're comparing them to are NFL deals or other pro sports deals where they're making a ton of money too. Now, like, the thing is, like, if you remember, the thing that jumps out to me is, like, the Coldest Crawford. Remember that air conditioning?
Oh yeah. The air conditioning commercial, yep.
It's like that. Like if he got paid $5 million to do that, which he didn't, but if he did in this fake scenario, that would probably be above what we would think is fair market value.
Right, and that's what they're going to do. What is going to happen is
compare it to though. Like that's the thing I don't understand.
Right.
Like if we come to the because you and I can sit here and say, yeah, DeColdis Crawford probably wasn't worth $5 million to do that like low budget air conditioning commercial. But if you assert that in court, you have to have precedent of similar deals. Whose deals are you going to look at in order to decide?
And who are you to tell me that I can't pay him what I want to pay him? I'm not party to the settlement.
Right.
So I'm going to sue you, saying you are restricting my rights to pay what I would like to pay. So that's really all there is to it. And as Vance points out in the chat, how soon before every state has laws similar to the Oregon and Nebraska ones to kneecap the clearinghouse? And what Vance is referring to is like there's a law in the state of Oregon that says that athletes do not have to disclose these deals. So if it violates state law to force them to disclose it, guess what? They're never going to disclose it.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too. It's like, do we know it's not public information how much State Farm paid Patrick Mahomes to be in their commercials, right?
No.
Any more than my salary, your salary is public information.
Right. It's interesting because the NFL does it because the teams and the players find that transparency tends to make them make more money. But I don't know if we're going to get there here. We'll probably get there in terms of some of these deals that the players are getting from the schools.
Yeah.
Because I do think the schools want accurate information about what other players are getting paid. It's really the people that do this. They just want to know who's getting what, and they want to cheat to do that. Like our boss, Shannon Terry, knows what people who do what we do make at every company. Why does he know that? Because it's his job to know that. Like he doesn't have the police go in or the government go in and say, CBS, tell them what you're paying Josh Pate. Like that's not how it works. Like it's his job to know how much people who do that job get paid, so that when let's say he wants to hire somebody new, or he's dealing with us, or he's dealing with another, like one of our writers, he knows what to offer and what's fair, and also what's going to get him blown out of the water, or if he's wasting money. Like,
yeah,
I can come in and say, you need to give me $5 million a year. He's going to laugh at me because he knows the market.
Yeah. And I think it's important too. It's like when it comes to you and your own deals, you kind of wish that they didn't know. But then when it comes to help the company and the business, because like you and I are both very much on board and hopeful and working hard to help promote On3's success as a company. You know what I mean? And I felt that way since the day I started. So if I found out that our owner of our company didn't know what fair market value was for the people he was hiring, that would be highly, troublesome.
But he doesn't have anybody submitting who's required to submit those deals from other companies to know. Like he doesn't know what ESPN doesn't send him a list of what they pay everybody. Like, you just got to figure it out. And that's what everybody in private business does.
Right. Yeah, no, and it's just like any sort of policing of income is not going to work. I don't care how you phrase it or who you hire or what, it's just not going to work, because the capping of income is anti-American. Period.
Unless you negotiate it with
bargain. Yeah, but that's not. But that's not what's happening here. So, in this certain stopgap to when we eventually get to that point, which we will, because it's the only way that a system like this can work. Without it going haywire, you're not going to be able to tell a person that their NIL deal is not fair market value. It doesn't matter what they get paid. Fair market value is what I got a bunch of cards in a dresser over here that are cardboard with pictures printed on them, and I can sell them for what they're worth. And you might think it's insane that somebody paid $6,800 for a Patrick Mahomes rookie card, but you have no business to tell that person that they don't have the prerogative to spend that much money on a card if they don't want to. And that's the same way it goes with everything.
You're worth whatever someone is willing to pay you. And that's one thing we're learning about this is this is like a truly open market. So it's been interesting to watch. And I'm sure once they do get their arms around it. They probably ultimately will get to CBA in some way, shape, or form. Like I'll be interested to see this study, because there'll be business school studies on this period in college sports, because it's really interesting, because as an experiment, because you had a market that was arbitrarily capped by a cartel. It got busted by the government. Then it became a fully open market. And I think there's a lot to learn from that. And there's a lot to learn from what's happened. So, like, again, in the market now, whatever people are paying for players is what they think they're worth. And if you don't think a player is worth that, you don't pay it. So this is the purest form of, are these guys getting what they're worth? Yeah.
Yep.
They're getting exactly what the schools think they're worth.
Yep. And if they actually perform, this is the thing too, that we never talk about. If they perform and are awesome and their teams are good, they are more than worth what they're being paid. Like,
yeah.
Like
and then if they don't perform, they're not. And that is the same with every employment, or well, it's not even employment. Every time someone purchases a service or purchases the work of someone else, sometimes they give you what you want. Sometimes you get exactly what you want. Sometimes you get more than you bargained for. Sometimes you get less than you bargained for. It's just how it works everywhere. Now, if they get to a point where they have contracts and they're I think you probably have to be employees to get to this point. But Grambling coach Mickey Joseph brought up a really interesting point the other day. And I think we're going to have Mickey Joseph on the show this week to ask him about it, because he's lost some players to FBS schools. And his thing is, Grambling should be compensated for that. And there is a real world example of this. And it's actually the pro sport that is most similar economically to college football. It's international soccer. That's what a transfer fee is in international soccer, where if Arsenal wants to take a player from Real Madrid, they have to pay the player whatever they're going to pay him, but there's a set agreed upon fee that they have to pay Real Madrid to sign the player. And so that, I think, would be very interesting, is how would that work? Now, I do think the players probably have to be employees, but could you protect 10 or so players on your roster with transfer fees and say, you can, like Tulane can say, you can have Darian Mensah, whoever wants him, but you're going to owe us $5 million.
So let me ask you this. And this is a whole rabbit hole of economics. And, maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but could Darian Mensah sue because under the guise of limiting his income potential based on rules? Because you would have to be collectively bargained to do that, right? Like, you can't just
But it's not in soccer. But the thing is, it goes across different countries. And the thing is, the players get theirs.
Yeah. But if a team is less likely to take Darian Mensah because the fee is too much, both for him and what they would owe to
and that's where you may have to have,
you might have a problem there in terms of like, hey, I have all these opportunities, I'm worth a lot of money. I didn't get these opportunities because Tulane enforced a fee in order for me to leave, and teams were not interested, not because of my ability and
that's why I think you have to have a situation where the players are under contract. Because the player probably would have to agree. Like the transfer fee would be part of the contract.
Of the contract, yeah.
Yeah. So the player would have knowledge beforehand and could say, no, I'm not signing that. Or, okay, that's fine. That's a fair wage relative. And that's a negotiating point. Like, higher salary, higher transfer fee. Lower salary, lower transfer fee. So that's, listen.
Yeah, you take on the risk of not being able to move on with the higher compensation in the meantime.
Right. And then when the contract runs out, the player can just leave. But if you've signed them to a deal that is the entirety of their eligibility, then somebody would have to pay. So, we're hoping to talk to Mickey Joseph about that. And I don't know that when he brought it up, I don't know that he's thought it through as far as that. I understand where he's coming from, because he's like, how am I supposed to do anything? How am I supposed to ever keep a player? We don't have the budget to do this. And that could be a good revenue stream, where if you become an FCS coach who is great at finding good players and developing them in a year, like you could have the biggest budget in your conference.
Yeah.
As outgoing players, get you paid. So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on.
And it's
This
also like
house settlement
winning is how good you are at identifying talent and developing them, because you make more money from that than actually winning football games. But that's a whole other discussion too.
So this house settlement is going to be approved unless the NCAA just says we're not making those tweaks and I think it'd be to the roster cap situation, which they cannot possibly be that stupid.
And also, what a bridge to die on that would have been.
Oh my God. Can you even imagine? No, I can't imagine, because the NCAA has been that stupid in the past. I don't think they'll be that stupid this time. I do not.
We can't let this go through, because why would we have opportunities for walk-on?
It's like you have an opportunity to not be a-holes here. Choose to take it. It's simple.
Nobody does.
All right, one last thing. We always love the introductory press conference where new coach is exposed to very weird school tradition. The greatest of these, of course, is Bobby Petrino calling the Hogs after midnight when he took the Arkansas job. But new Texas A&M basketball coach Bucky McMillan sawing him off for the first time. Here's your moment of Zen. I'm sure Bucky McMillan is going like, who's varsity and why are we sawing his horns off? Like, what are you doing here?
I got to say that video, the camera angle was terrible for A&M. Like, that didn't work out well for them. Like being right underneath the yell
unless leader. You're the yell leader.
Yeah.
You look great.
Yeah, no, they're always buff, but like, it's just like, I got to tell you, Ags, this is just part of the deal. This is just part of the deal. You know who you know that your place is special and different, and you're going to get made fun of a lot. That's it.
The key, as in anything else, is to just do it confidently.
Yep.
And so if you're sawing them off confidently,
no, you have pride, and you have pride in who you are and what you do. But you also understand that, like, being made fun of publicly is just part of the deal. And if they don't understand it, that's their problem. I do understand it a little bit, being married to an ag. Okay. And having gone down there a few times. I also have to acknowledge that if you are a coach who isn't from College Station or don't know what you're getting into, that might be a oh shit moment. You know,
what have I done?
You know, it's like, where am I right now? But you know, I think that's part of the charm of A&M, and like that's what I learned about my wife. She had a 1 month long oh shit, where am I moment her freshman year when she went there, and it grows on you and it becomes a part of who you are. So I got a story to tell you, Ags. It's okay.
I'll rock the good ag. We'll have him on the show later too. We'll have a yell leader just telling stories. But tomorrow, top 10 QBs for 2025. You're gonna hate it. I already know you're gonna hate it. Some of you are gonna love it. Most of you are gonna hate it. You're gonna yell at us. I'm ready. It's time. Ari, it's time. It's time for red meat football conversations.
Yes. Yeah, I'm ready to get back into it. We've been into it, but I want to get into it.
Let's talk to you tomorrow.